Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our autumn road project. Oh. We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Keenan, hello.
And we will be doing this project in 7 steps. So our very first step is we are going to sketch our road and then paint it a light gray color. Our second step is we will be doing the top half of our trees. The third step is we'll be putting in the medium and dark values on our trees. Our fourth step is we will be doing the bottom half of the trees. The fifth step is putting in the medium and dark values on the bottom half of these trees. The sixth step, shadows along our road from the tree, and then our yellow line. And then our very last step is our car. Keenan likes to refer to it as a Batmobile.
Correct.
And any finishing details. All right.
Okay.
Now we are using 3 paintbrushes for this project. So our brushes are around 2, around 6, and around 12. Please know that we encourage you using whatever it is that you have. So if you don't have these brushes, that's okay. Use what you got. We have 4 colors for this project. Our very first color is Tiger Orange, which actually creates like a really wonderful yellow color when you add water to it. Our second color is Space Blue. Our third color is Rose Red. And our last color is Paynes Gray. Now, just so you guys know, as you can see, we're gonna be mixing a lot of colors here. So what I like to do to set up my palette to prepare it is if I'm gonna mix yellow with blue to make green, I have their own little pile over here. And then I just have it my own clean yellow because I wanna use just the color yellow. And then to mix orange, I have another yellow pile over here. So I like to do 3 yellows for my mixing. So then that way, I don't have to worry about muddying up my colors. You know what I'm saying?
That's smart.
Now, the paper that I'm using is our Let's Make Art watercolor paper. That is what comes in this hygge box. And I'm using Holbein soft tape to tape off the edges after I cut it in half. Now you're free to do this on a full sheet, but just so you know, it will just take you a bit longer. I think that's everything. Our oath. If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. And I love starting that way because sometimes when we get in our head too much, we don't pay attention to the things that make what we're doing fun. And watercolor is all fun. Like, it's just cool. It's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at our faces and how intense we are. We love it. But when we're in our head about this is what it should look like, or I should be painting faster, or I should be doing this, or I should be better than this, then we're focusing on that instead of how freaking cool it is to drop paint in water and watch it move. And that's what we're here for.
Which is really cool to watch.
So cool. Okay. So we're going to start with step 1 where we are going to draw our road. Now, as you can see, we do not have an outline with this project, but that's okay. I know you guys can still do it. So it's up to you how windy you want this road to be. I decided to go with kind of like a soft curve going through my composition. But if you wanted to do one of these guys, this is your painting. You can do whatever you want.
Ooh, that would be cool.
So I'm just going to kind of start with one line curving up. And then this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is you want to try and make sure that your road is an even thickness. So if you got to do it in little chunks, kind of sketch that in. Can they see that pretty good?
And you could even have, hear me out, another path going off of that path.
Ooh, you could be like, wah.
Wah. Exactly. Maybe hide a little cabin in there.
Yeah.
For the Batmobile to go to.
Well, the Bat Cave, obviously.
The Bat Cave.
But I don't know if you would see that from an overhead.
You wouldn't.
Now, if you want to put in your kind of like lightly sketch where your yellow lines are going to go now, you can. And I'm lifting my pencil not because I'm doing the dashes, because these lines are way too long for it to be a dashed road. I'm lifting my pencil because it's much easier for me to check the center of an area instead of doing one continuous line. When you do one continuous line, it's easy for it to be like, and it kind of like goes out. But if I'm like, okay, in this section, that's the middle. In this section, that's the middle. That kind of thing. There's enough information there where you can do a continuous line with it staying even. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right. And then make any adjustments that you need to. And now we're going to paint it gray. So we have Paynes Gray here on our palette. So I'm just going to mix that with a little bit of water. And then I'm going to paint my road. And I'm using my round 6. You can use whatever brush you feel comfortable using. That's it. That's step 1.
Nice road.
Thank you. Okay, now while we're letting that dry and before we start on step 2, I want to tell you that there's 2 different ways that you can approach this step. One of the ways is you can do just wet, like circle shapes, and then drop in the color with each of those circles, let that dry, and then layer your values, excuse me, on top of that. Or what you can do is you can do it all while it's wet. So you would wet the entire area, drop in the colors, let those colors kind of move on their own, and then while it's still wet, drop in darker values where those colors meet, and then when that's totally dry, go ahead and do that last finishing, like really dark value section. So choose whatever way works for you. I will demonstrate how to do both. But essentially what we're looking for here is how we try and communicate that this is an overhead view of something that is 3-dimensional, like the trees that we're painting, is your tree needs to have, so if this is like your tree shape, the top of it, the very top of it, if we're looking at it straight on, the very top of it is hitting that light. The light is shining on the very top of it, which overhead, if we're to move our positioning, is right in the middle. And how we make it seem like it's moving away from it is we need to have a darker value along the edges of our tree. Like that, okay? And then when we're getting towards like really communicating that the ground continues to go, is the trees next to it. So let me put in my darker value along the edges. And this is going to be all wet, so it might smear a little bit, but I'm just trying to communicate the point here. There'll be a really dark value in between where these trees meet, because that's like the ground. You know what I mean? Like that's like the farthest away from our light, so it's really dark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that looks super cool.
So really what we're looking for here when you're creating these trees, because it's easy to get lost, there's a lot going on here, but look at these different tree sections and try and keep in mind, okay, I want there to be a light value, I want there to be a medium value, and I want there to be a dark value. That's what we're going for here. Light, medium, dark. Light, medium, dark. Light, medium, dark. And this is all wet on wet technique, so it is going to blend together, get a little bit messy, but I actually thought that that lent itself to this project because when you think of really dense trees, they overlap with each other. And so sometimes you do get some funky, crazy colors going on because maybe the green is overlapping with the orange. You know what happens when they kind of do that. So let's do it. So I'm gonna show how to do both. So I'm taking my 12 and I'm using just clean water and I'm just doing a wet shape. So it's kind of circular, you can't see it very well. And then I'm gonna grab some color and just kind of drop it in. And drop it in and just let it move. And then you can either pull color from what's already there and let them touch. You can start bringing in another color, like here's some green.
Cool.
So this is all very much like wet on wet technique that we are embracing here. And if you want to avoid getting really muddy colors, think about how these colors are next to each other on the wheel. So for example, yellow and green are next to each other. So these trees, if they blend together and touch, it's okay, because when they mix together, they're not going to create mud. But red and green are not next to each other on the color wheel. So if I were to do mix green and do a green tree right here, it's not that it's bad, it's just that when that red and that green mix, it's going to create kind of a muddy dark value, which again, this is fall. So like there are brown trees. So it's not the end of the world. I just want to say, like, if you want to try and keep your colors vibrant, think about what colors are next to each other on the wheel, and like paint your trees kind of in that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, and what I was going to add, if I could.
Yes.
I'll
allow it.
Thank you. That green and red combo where they touch, that could be like an automatic, there's your ground brown.
Oh yeah, that's right. Then I'm going to mix some orange. So I want like the full spectrum here. And you can see that I'm still kind of like just the same thing with the orange and the green. See, when they mix together, they kind of create a muddy color.
Yeah.
That's okay. So it's up to you how loose you want this to be. Like, I'm moving fairly fast with this. If you wanted to really like slow it down and be really precise and make sure the colors don't even blend together at all, you can do that. And so you would kind of work at this pace. Oh, they accidentally touched anyway. And then do that. So you can go slow, you can go fast. Another thing that you can do, and I think this is the fastest way, is you actually just wet the entire section. So I'm going to kind of split it down the middle here so you guys can see. Wet the entire section and then just drop in the color. Now this one, obviously you have way less control here of where your colors are going to go, but there's something kind of fun about that too. And it's much quicker. Now the other thing that I would say is a little bit tricky about this method is that your trees are going to get a lot bigger naturally, and so I want you to think about tree size as you're painting this. And there's nothing, like, some trees are really big, but also some of them are small. So for me, what I chose to do to combat, like, this is a huge orange tree, right? So what I could do there is I can actually just kind of like split it into two and put like a medium value here to section it off. You see that?
Oh, cool.
And while it's still wet in this wet on wet method that we're doing here, is I'm dropping in the like medium and dark values while it's wet and kind of sectioning off and separating these different trees and letting those letting those colors kind of blend out.
Cool.
So as I said, there is no right or wrong way to this project. You can do it, if you like the look of this way, you could do it this way. If you like the look of this way, do it that way. Or if you're just like, I actually want to approach it a completely different way, you have every right to do that. So at this point, I'm thinking now about my values. I want to make sure that the very center of my tree is the lightest value, and then as it kind of moves down, the values transition. So here's my highlight, and along all of the sides it's going to a medium, and then it's going to go to a dark. Now, because we are doing such a loose technique, it might not always work out exactly that way. But see how we're starting to get a little bit of volume over here? Mm-hmm. Now, another thing that you can do is if you paint this, and because it's moving and everything, you lose some of your light value, blot the center.
What?
Now we got some strong highlights.
That's cool.
So you can lift a little bit of color out while it's nice and wet. Okay, let's go back to this because this dried a little bit, so now I can kind of continue on with this method to give you the full effect of both.
Yes.
So these trees are green here. So when I grab my medium value, I want to grab more of a green. I'm going to start sectioning them off. Now this one has a little bit of yellow and orange in it. And remember, think about trees. Think about how on one tree there could be green leaves, there could be yellow leaves, there could be brown leaves, there can be so many different kinds. So if you have a tree that's multicolored in hue, that's not wrong. That totally happens, okay?
Okay. Yeah, trees, they sing that one song. I could be brown, I could be blue, I could be violet too.
Oh, do trees sing that?
Yeah, trees sing that.
Wow, I didn't know that trees did that.
Yeah, they croak, creak, and sing that one song.
Now we have Paynes Gray here that can help us darken our values, but I just want to use a word of warning. Black is a very powerful, well, Paynes Gray is a very powerful color or shade, and you don't need a lot of it, and it's really easy to use it but what that would do is it will just kind of gray out your painting. So I am a huge fan of, like, if I'm trying to do the darkest value on the green, I will take green and a little bit of my Paynes Gray. So it darkens it, but it doesn't completely eliminate color. And that's the color I will use, kind of in between these sections. So, okay, so now you guys can kind of see the difference. Now here, because we did everything while it was wet, things kind of like softened and moved out on its own. And then you can just go back in. And drop in your dark values too.
That looks crazy. I love that wet on wet technique though.
I mean, all of them have a fun element to it, you know?
They do. But man, my favorite for sure is that let them do their own thing.
Yeah.
And then you can choose where you want them to break off.
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit like you don't have to make all of the decisions. Because do you ever feel like sometimes you're like, if I have to make one more dang decision, I'm going to lose my mind? Is that not a thing for you? Sometimes it's a thing for me.
That's not necessarily my thing.
Michael will be like, what do you want for dinner? And I was just like, the greatest gift you can give me is to decide for me so I don't have to put any thinking power.
Gift.
That's what I want. And so that's kind of why I like, I mean, honestly, watercolor in general, because I feel like so much of the water and the color working together do the hard work for me of saying where it's going to go. And then I basically just like arrive to this painting and I'm like, well, that's where it went. So what are we going to do with this kind of thing, you know? Now here I'm kind of just pulling color already instead of using clean water. We can just drop it in. But like let there be a lot of different mixtures on your palettes of different colors. Think about what it is to drive down a road and you see, I mean, I drove to Lawson the other day and it's all like, which is, I don't know, like a half hour away from where we are. And the leaves were starting to change, and gosh, the whole trip, I was like, girls, look at those trees, look at that. And I loved it. I loved seeing all the different colors that were happening.
And Lawson's kind of a town that's tucked away on back roads.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have some gorgeous winding roads with some beautiful trees.
That is absolutely what we saw. I mean, and sometimes depending on the type of tree, you get hints of purple.
See, that's what I'm saying. I can be blue, I can be brown.
So if you want to introduce that to your painting, go for it. You can just mix your rose red and your blue together, and you can get this kind of brownish purpley color.
That's pretty.
Now, the theme for this box is hygge, which comes from Denmark, and it is essentially defined as like cozy contentment. And for me, when I was thinking about what that means and what I love to do, everyday things in my life, you know, like driving my daughters to school in the morning. And as we're driving, noticing the colors of the leaves and pointing them out, or, you know, depending on the time of year, it's sunrises and we can see the gorgeous clouds, and you know, it's just like a fun activity that my daughters and I do, where we're just like, look at that over there, look at that color, wow, do you see that purple over there in that sky? And it's the small things like that of appreciating what's around you with the people that you love. Like those are the joys. You know what I mean? Like focusing on those things and I don't know, I feel like that's really what it's all about. And it's easy to get, you know, especially in the car, you know, thinking, oh, I got to do all this today, I got to do this, I got to do this, and stressing about, oh gosh, is this person gonna... And I guess what I wanted with this project is to have you guys look up and notice the small things that can be really beautiful.
Hygge, bringing us into the simple zone.
Hygge what?
Hygge is bringing us into the simple zone.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Look up.
Another, I mean, I actually came up with this project in a dream.
Oh.
Or I don't know if it was totally a dream, but I remember. So to give you guys a little bit of insight of my process when I create these boxes, usually I ideate of what we're going to be painting like 6 months in advance. So I knew, you know, 6 months ago that I wanted to paint something like fall colors and trees. You know that feeling of like Thanksgiving in November where that's what you feel like painting. And I was trying to put it all together in my mind. So in my mind, as like the times, as I continue about my day and my everyday and like working on what I'm currently supposed to be painting, in the back of my mind, I'm like, what's something exciting that I can paint? And I kind of just let the ideas come to me as I'm doing different things, right? And I woke up one morning and I had this exact scene in my mind where I'm like, fall is about driving through windy country roads where there's all these different colors of the trees and you just love it. And that is comfort and that is contentment and that is fall. And I like literally saw it. And so I came into the office and I like painted it, and I was just like, this is it, man, this is the project. And so I like to do that with all of the different projects in the box, and then I kind of put them all together, and I think through, I'm like, okay, how do these relate to each other? Does this feel complete? Do they feel like the theme? Does this theme still fit within this project? And so sometimes I have to take some projects out. Sometimes I have to rethink about the theme to make sure that they all kind of are cohesive. But it's kind of like this movement that's in the back of my mind of like fall, November, I think of, you know, tea, and I think of reds and warmth, and, you know, and just kind of like letting the ideas come to me over time, and then I put them on paper and make sure that they all work together. But this one I was pretty adamant about having in the box because I'm like, listen, I woke up with it. This was a vision.
Yeah, seriously, that's awesome. Put that in the box.
Okay, so now that I've kind of filled in my trees, while it's still wet, if I've lost some of my highlights, maybe I can lift some out. And then I'll start putting in my like dark and medium values. Ooh, look at those. I love that.
I know. It's funny how I've seen the paper towel technique multiple times, and I would not have put it in this as being an option to help out and bring highlights.
Yep.
So I'm glad you showed it.
Now remember that for the most part, trees are kind of roundish, but not perfect circles, and they are all different sizes depending on the type of tree and how old they are. So you're gonna have some sections that are small, and you're gonna have some sections that are big. You're gonna have some that are maybe a little bit longer and skinnier, and some that are really wide. Allow there to be variation and love the different shapes the same way that we would see in nature. So now I'm kind of just reacting to the shapes that naturally occurred during this wet on wet technique. The trickiest thing, I think the part that takes the longest time, is trying to match your values with the hues. So for example, like around the greens, making sure you have a dark green in there. You know what I mean? Like when you get to the yellows, you gotta switch up the colors. You don't want to do all just brown.
It's got to be related somehow.
You want to try and relate it somehow. I mean, it's not the end of the world if it's all just brown. I just feel like it kind of like adds to the richness of your painting by adjusting those values by the hue instead of just like lights and darks, you know?
Yeah. This makes me want to go on a road trip.
You know, one of my favorite traditions that Michael's family had. So Michael, my husband, and I met when we were, 13, and best friends all through high school. We didn't start dating until college. And when I was 15 years old, his family has this tradition, and he invited me up to it, and we've gone quite a few times, where we're from Northern California, and if you go up into the mountains, there are these aspen trees that are kind of like birch trees. And so these gorgeous white trunks, but the leaves are like bright yellow. And they would have a picnic up there. So the first time I met his grandparents and the first time I met his extended family, we just drove up into this place that they knew, pulled over on the side of the road. His grandma made this delicious picnic where she like homemade sandwiches and wrapped them in parchment paper, and we had hot chocolate, and then we had like cookies and stuff, and we just sat out at this picnic table surrounded by these aspen trees, just taking in their color. And that was the trip, just this picnic in the trees. And I was just like, this is fabulous.
That's a memory that you never want to forget, and it's always one that you, if you can recreate it, it's so good.
It was just one of my favorite things his family did, and it just kind of showed me that like to make memories with your family, it doesn't have to be anything more than driving to somewhere that you enjoy and eating a delicious sandwich on the back of your truck.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, and that was it. I mean, it probably took like probably close to an hour to drive there, but
that's not that bad.
It was worth it. It was so worth it.
That's awesome.
They don't have to be these big, expensive excursions. I mean, I just want my kids to remember things like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that you could do too, as you're putting these trees in, and you're adding your medium and your dark values, but it's possible that it's so wet with, you know, the water and all the colors that your values just keep kind of blending out, and we're not getting our variation in like value is not staying. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give this a second to dry, because I feel like I put in like my medium values and they blended out fine, but I feel like if I put in my dark values while it's nice and wet in here, then they're not going to stay sharp. They're going to bleed out too, and I don't want that. With your darkest values, which is going to be the areas in between where your trees meet, we want those to stay sharp. We don't want that to bleed into the center of our highlight of our trees. So I'm going to let my tree area dry for a second, and I'm going to move to the bottom of the road, and then I'm just going to work the two areas back and forth, so then I can go in when it's ready or leave it if it's not ready. Okay?
Okay.
So here we go. This time I'm going to do that whole wet on wet method. I feel like it's a little bit more fun and quicker, but again, use whatever method you prefer. So I have my 12. I'm using just water. I'm going to wet the whole area. You can use a 6 for this. But sometimes it's just easier to use a larger brush. And if it's easier for you to pre-mix the colors on your palette, go for that. So you could have like a yellow pile, a green pile, a dark green pile, a red pile, and an orange pile, and just kind of drop it in. Now, because I was kind of talking so much, I wasn't paying too much attention to my color changes, you know, the advice that I gave at the beginning of being like, try and pay attention to what colors are next to each other. But it got a little bit brown and muddy, but not too bad. So I'm going to try and be a little bit better about the colors. So I wanted to do dark green there, and I'm like, oh, nope, there's red. Let's move it over here.
What's cool too is as the water dries in different sections, your trees will automatically look different.
Mm-hmm. And you can go back in too and just be like, I actually want to adjust the shape of this one and round it out a bit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Just because you put color down once and walked away doesn't mean you can't go back and slightly adjust the area.
Right.
I actually really love this like dark purpley red color.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I'm going to put it in over here. And don't leave too much space between your tree line and your road. I actually like to have, if you wanted the trees to overlap a little bit, you can, or if you want a clean line, you can. Let me tell you the difference. So if one's overlapping, then think about how it's overgrown. Okay, so if you have lots of trees going into your road, then think about that canopy feel of driving through a road. Or if it's the type of situation where, you know how you're driving and the tree line sits a little bit farther back from the road line, that's where you're gonna have a clean edge, where that road line is clean and not impeded by any trees. So use that information as you will for whatever you feel like you want your road to feel like. If you really like that canopy field of overgrown, then let that color go over the road. If you want it to feel very clean and separated, like along the clean side of a mountain almost, then have a clean road line along the edge where the color doesn't go over. Okay?
That would be cool. Made me think of another idea.
Yeah?
What if in your road you put a small bridge, and under your road and through the trees you put a small creek or river?
Ooh, that would be cool. That would be pretty. Like a little lake starting right here.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Now, I'm just using my round 12 for this, but use whatever color you want.
That's nice.
I love these. You can even use some salt in this.
Ooh, yes. Did you say you were using your round 12?
Yes.
But we could use any color we wanted?
Is that what I said?
I think so.
I wouldn't put it past me. I would not put it past me.
That's great.
Okay, now you can kind of step back and say, what are the overall colors that are happening within my painting? Do I like that? Do I want to adjust it? That kind of thing. So actually, if I'm looking at my reference photo, I have a lot of reds and greens. Like the reds and greens are really popping out in this one for me, where this one I feel like the oranges are kind of overtaking. Neither one is right or wrong. There's not a bad here. It's just being aware and letting you know that if you want to change something, you have every right to change it. But if you're more like, oh, I'm just gonna let it tell me and decide for me, that's cool too. I feel like I need some like more vibrant green, because even though some of these trees are like that yellow green, maybe some of them are still not ready yet for fall, you know?
They're not.
They're like, no.
I refuse. Respectfully.
I respectfully refuse to change color.
I'll accept your leaves changing as an opinion, but I wholeheartedly disagree.
Actually do more green down here. Let this be more a green area. And at this point, you can see that my color's not blending out. That means this paper has dried by the time I worked its way over. You can re-wet the area with clean water, or you can just paint on top of it. There's no right or wrong. So for me and my road line, I'm gonna try and keep it mostly clean with maybe a tiny bit going off the edge, overlapping into my road. So you can see I'm kind of just taking my brush, kind of making that road edge clean. You just wanna be careful not to create like a thick line with whatever color. Okay, now I'm gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna go back to my top. I'm gonna switch to my 6, and then I'm gonna really focus on my dark and medium values here. So I'm gonna start with, it's easier if you do it by color. So I'm gonna mix a medium value green, and just in around my green trees, I'm gonna put that in. I'm kind of doing like little dots. And sometimes what I like to do is I will soften the edge with just a damp brush so that transition feels a little bit more natural. Like so. So you put in your green around the edge. You rinse your brush, you hit it off the side of the cup, and then you just kind of smooth out in the center as it's going towards the middle. So I'm going to do the same thing to all the green trees. And now I'm going to do that to all the yellow trees. And for my yellow medium value, I'm going to mix a tiny bit of red in there to make it kind of orange. Maybe a tiny, tiny bit of Paynes Gray to kind of give it like a golden brown color. And then I'm just kind of letting the blooms in the wet on wet technique inform me of that tree line. So I like to do a section and then I kind of soften it. Now I feel like this area kind of fell off, you know? You're like, what's going on over here? So I'm just going to shape it. And then for my orange, you're gonna wanna mix your yellow and your red together to make orange. And then you add a little bit of Paynes Gray in there. So it's like a brown.
I love the difference between the top and the bottom right now.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, huh?
Yeah. The bottom kind of makes me think of like every picnic Jell-O.
Totally, totally. You know, Jell-O is one of those things, and I like to cook. My husband's an excellent cook, and sometimes I'll help him out in the kitchen. And every single year I make orange Jell-O for Thanksgiving, and every single year it's not set. I can't make Jell-O.
It doesn't set?
It's always like watery.
Really?
Yes. And my husband and I just laugh every time because it's just like,
it's Jell-O.
it's Jell-O. It's a Jell-O, but I can't make it. I can never do it right. I always mess it up every year.
That's amazing.
So funny.
What?
I know. Maybe I just need to have my 10-year-old make it. She'll probably just
Nail it.
nail it.
Well, now I'm wondering, I don't think I've made Jell-O a whole lot, and now I'm wondering if I can make Jell-O.
Well, you try it and then report back, okay?
Okay.
Okay, now on the areas that are more dry, we put in our medium values, and on the areas that are more dry, we're gonna go in with our darkest values. And as you can see, I'm not going with my darkest value and outlining the entire thing. I'm essentially just doing like little corners of it to say like, this is the part where there is no tree and it goes to the ground. So if you were to do that around every single tree, we would lose that feeling of them feeling like overlapping and together. And it would actually kind of flatten out whatever dimension that we have because it would be so kind of blocky and separated. So just like kind of on the little corners. You're like the corners of the round shape that you got. But the marks that we're making with these, for the most part, are kind of more like triangles in between. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Can you put that farther to the right? Thank you.
So think about like these organic shapes kind of coming in contact with each other and overlapping. There's going to be kind of more this triangle shape in between them.
Yeah.
And of course, if you think about trees and how they grow, I mean, I don't totally know, but I feel like there's not a lot of like rhyme and reason. There could be areas where there are large gaps in between the trees, and there could be areas where they are more dense and there's not as many gaps. So allow your painting to have that kind of uneven feeling of growth. Yeah, you see how that top one feels way more dimensional than the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
It's values, man. It's just all values.
I know, it's crazy because it looks like trees and then the bottom looks like a field.
Yeah, it looks
Right?
flat.
It does.
Yeah, this project is fun, but there are a lot of steps. I wouldn't say it's necessarily difficult, because some paintings, like the techniques themselves, aren't necessarily difficult, but the patience to do them is actually where the difficulty comes in, you know? So just acknowledge that. And maybe you're in a spot where you're like, I want to do this project, but right now is not the time. I'm not in my patient mood. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, you could still do impatient mode. You could still do the wet on wet technique. Throw your colors in and then walk away.
Yeah. Okay, that section was too bright for me, like too light of a value, so I dropped in some green there.
Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna let that be. Now we're gonna move on to the bottom part. So I'm gonna mix some kind of medium values. I wanna make sure that I have a medium value for my green areas, my yellow areas, my red areas, and my orange areas. For the red medium values, if you wanna lean into that purple color, that's what I like to do. And then like this tree is huge, right? So it's just like, oh.
Tree is huge.
Let's separate these. And if you need to separate it again, because you're like, what tree is that shape? You know?
Oh, multiple trees.
You can do multiple trees in one chunk. And don't forget to dampen swoop so you kind of get that more natural value change. Transition in value, I guess. Now what I can see eventually being a problem with this method is it could, like, if this is your paper and this is our road, And your tree area could like start to look like a puzzle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're really utilizing your dark values to curve out edges and shape them. You want them to feel actually like different, like separate pieces instead of one,
Cool.
you know?
Yep.
So by really kind of highlighting the separating little chunky areas to shape them and do that value change, that will create the separation that we need. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Sweet.
Oh, my green turned brown. Let's get a different green. Remember to swoop, swoop and soften.
Swoop and soften.
Swoop and soften.
Sounds like directions to open a cookie. Twist and shout. Swoop and soften.
Swoop and soften. The Let's Make Art cookie line coming to you soon.
Yes, January 2023. Let's make art.
January 2023, Keenan, you got to get on some
Swoop and
cookie
soften.
recipes.
It's actually a Jell-O cookie, so I need you to start on the recipe.
Crap, so I got to figure out how to turn Jellos into cookies.
Step 1, start with Jell-O.
Step 1, don't make Jello and just make a cookie. I could do that.
That would be great. With this new Jell-O recipe, the first step is to not make Jell-O anything.
It's kind of funny because with this painting, like the deeper you get into it, the muddier my colors are just getting like browner and browner and browner. Because I just like don't like having to rinse my brush every time. So sometimes I'll just grab another color.
I see.
And
you even have 2 glasses of water to be used.
I never use it. I never use the second clean cup.
Strange. In contrast.
Why can't I do better at this?
I mean, that one was a mile away. Like, you automatically were like, I'm never going to use this.
I know myself.
Yeah.
This is all for show here.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, but I need to get this tutorial. We still got to do our road. We still got to do our car. So I'm just going to like power move through this, okay?
This would be another good one for doing a time challenge.
Oh yeah,
How many trees can you cover in 2 minutes?
seriously. Okay, and now I'm going to, and you can see there are some like white spaces in here, and I just left those because I knew that I was just going to be putting my dark values in there anyway. But you want to make sure you're going to the edge of your paper. So again, think about each individual tree shape. Ooh, I really like this area over here. That feels nice. This orange, I think, feels too much all the same color. I'm gonna see if I can just like, let's do that like purple red color at least. I can't lift out the color, but there we go. Throw that in there a little bit, just so it kind of like breaks up the space. It doesn't feel so one note. But even with this like dark purpley brown color, reddish, red, purple, brown, there still needs to be a value change on it. So you might have to use just like Paynes Gray straight for the darkest value. Okay, that is starting to feel more complete. And you can decide again how like gappy you want it to be, like how many, like here, I got a lot of dark values down here. You can see there's a lot of separation between some of these trees. So if you're looking at that, you're like, I actually really like the look of that. Well, go ahead and throw that into your painting. Or if you're like, no, I really want this to feel full and not as much separation between the two, then don't put that in there. Okay, so now what we are going to focus on is our road. Now, when we put our gray road in initially, it was the first value we put on our painting. And as you can see, as we added a full range of values since then, our road almost looks white at this point.
Totally.
So if you want to do another layer of gray to like do a medium value, you can. I'm going to actually, all right, I'm going to tell you my full process of how I'm going to do it. I'm going to look at the lightest values of my tree, and I'm going to see if my road is a lighter value than that. So I'm going to blur my eyes, unfocus my eyes, and look at my painting. If my road is like hugely sticking out and the trees are not, that means my road is a much lighter value than the trees that I have. And I don't want that to happen because I want to make sure that my values are in the same world. So my road values would be, the lightest value on my road would be the lightest value on my tree, if we're thinking about light hitting it. You know what I'm saying? The road may even be a tiny, tiny bit darker because the tree itself is closer to the sky. And so because my road is such a light value, and I can see it actually in my reference photo here, that it feels it's coming forward a little bit. It's fighting forward because of how bright that value is. So I'm going to bring it down to a medium value and try and match the lightest value on my road being the lightest value on my trees. So I'm going to take more Paynes Gray. And using my 6. Okay, that is already starting to feel like it belongs in this painting more than what was there before.
I agree.
I'm just gonna kind of smooth it out. You might be picking up a little bit of color from the trees, like a little bit of warmth. That I'm okay with. Oh, yeah, that feels better. Okay.
Cool.
And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in my shadows. So depending on how overgrown your trees are and really where the position is of the sun, you're going to get different shadows on your trees. Now, I really wanted it to feel like you're driving down that road and some of the areas are shaded and some are not because of the trees coming around. So I wanted there to be a visible shadow on my tree. So on my road. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of my Paynes Gray and kind of like, I'm gonna think about my tree shape where it kind of like rounds out. And I'm gonna add some shadow. Now this is where it gets tricky. I want it to be a light shadow. So it's just gonna be like one value click darker than my road. Nothing, I don't want black. I don't want like darkest value here because that's gonna feel too separated. And if you're like, well, how do I know where to put my shadows? Maybe one area is very shadowy, so these shadows are kind of overlapping on both sides. Or maybe it's just a little hint. There's really, I don't have a lot of rhyme or reason to it, except in the areas where you do have a tree that's overlapping. Now when it comes to shadows, the darkest part of the shadow is going to be closest to the tree, the edge of the road. But when you add shadows, depending on placement, it might like change the shape of your road, but that's okay. Let's have these shadows connect over here, because why not? Gosh, doesn't that just feel like...
Looks so cool.
Shady road, shady fall road.
That's the name of this road, Shady Fall.
Shady Fall. Now, as your painting dries, watercolors tend to lighten in value as they dry, which means that maybe the medium values that you were putting down for your shady road are need another layer on them. So you can make those decisions as it dries, and you can say, oh yeah, no, I need another layer, or actually that looks pretty good, I don't want to mess with that. I can see myself creating a pattern in my shadows. So I'm going to mess up some areas on purpose. Okay, that feels good. Now when it comes to this car, in my reference photo, I had the car about here, but now that I have a tree kind of growing out there, I can't put the car there because the tree's there. So I got to move my car. And then I'm going to see if I can lift out a little bit of color for the highlight of the car. So I'm just going to use clean water and a damp brush and just do like a water drop. And what I like to do is I kind of like just drop in water and let it soak in for a second. And while it's soaking in, I'm just going to kind of soften some of these shadows. Then I'm going to take my paper towel and blot up that spot. Great. Now I can paint my car there.
Oh, nice.
But it's not ready yet. You got to wait for it to dry. So when we're painting our car, I mean, Keenan made fun of my car. He says it looks like a Batmobile.
I didn't make fun. I said, awesome, it's the Batmobile.
So I actually looked at so many pictures of like cars from a bird eyes view to make it seem more car-y. And I didn't have much success.
Carry. It's like Carrie, but with an sound. Carrie.
Car-y,
Yes,
that's right.
Like the babysitter.
So you got the roof and you got the trunk and you got the hood, right? But essentially they all just look like rectangles. Like that's what we're working with here. So I kind of curved my rectangle here to show like the front of the car, which is curved. And then I did a little bit of a line here to show the difference between the roof and the hood. And then maybe kind of curve this for the trunk. But it's not a lot of detail, okay? So because we're painting this like this size. So play with it, but I'm just gonna tell you right now, essentially what we're going to do is a kind of curved rectangle with a little bit of lines here, but the center part on all sections needs to be highlighted in the middle because that sunlight is hitting that roof of the car. And think about how bright that is, right? And then there's gonna be a little bit of a value change along the edges. And don't forget the shadow underneath your car because that's gonna ground it. Okay?
Okay.
So when it's dry enough, just grab some. I just use Paynes Gray. So I got my long rectangle here, kind of curved, defining the roof, maybe a little bit of the trunk. And then I'm just gonna kind of use a damp brush and just, I don't wanna totally erase my highlight, but I'm just gonna soften it a little bit. I'm gonna let that dry and then I will do another layer. And then along this road, I kind of want to clean up my lines a little bit. So I'm gonna take my 6, and if your road is dry, I'm just gonna kind of shape my road a little bit. Kind of utilizing that kind of triangle shape. Okay. And one thing that I noticed here is that this highlight actually had like, or this shadow had a highlight in the middle of it. And I found that to be distracting, so I'm trying to try and even out this value. Okay. Let's do another round on my car, kind of shape it up. And then the shadow underneath it, I still feel like that highlight is a little bit too light. A bit better. And then we want to add our yellow line. We're getting close to the end, you guys. You're doing great. So for the yellow line, you want to think about how the color itself is going to change from the shadowed areas of the road to the not shadowed areas. So in the areas where there is no shadow, and it might not, like my road in my painting, this one is much darker than my road in this one. So it might not be as vibrant, but essentially these kind of yellow spaces you're gonna put in, but then when it comes in contact with the shadow, the yellow is gonna be darker. So I'm gonna add a little Paynes Gray, maybe a little bit of a red. You don't want it to feel You don't want it to totally be a different color, but and if it's easier for you to do the whole thing in just the yellow, like the bright yellow, and then go over in the shaded parts, you could do that.
Crazy.
My car is much bigger on this one than my reference, but I'm okay with that.
That's a box truck on this one.
That's right, it's a moving truck.
Yes.
They're like, we heard about Northern California and those aspen trees.
We are on
We
the
are
way.
going. Okay, I feel pretty good. I think I could probably take my shadows on my road one click darker. Let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, just a little bit. This is one of those that you could probably keep messing with it and playing with it for a while. So just like kind of be aware of what you're doing, and if you're feeling yourself get frustrated, for me, that's a sign that I'm overworking. It's not necessarily how long it's taking you to do a painting, but more like, do you feel yourself being like, it's not that. That is when you need to walk away. That's when you're in danger of overworking your painting. So this is our autumn road project.
Whoa.
Should we do a tape reveal?
Oh, yes.
So you're gonna wanna slowly move away. But this tape is so gosh dang wonderful. Look at those clean edges, my friends.
Mm.
And I know that we did a lot of layers and details in this project, took a little bit longer, but I just feel like the first half of doing that wet on wet technique, seeing where the colors moved, reacting to the colors, reacting to the blends and the bleeds, embracing the accidental element that comes with watercolor, like that is a celebration of watercolor. That's what this project is, which I think is so fun. And I hope that with all the techniques we use in this, you can see how there can be an element of looseness and like not planning everything out perfectly, but then reacting to it and still getting a painting at the end that you're like, yes, like I made that, you know? So I feel like it kind of encompasses all of these ways that you can work with watercolor to build something. I hope you had fun with this project. I love those clean edges. Look at that.
I know.
So fun. There's so much variation in how you can do this project. Everybody's is going to look so different. So please take time to share it. It's when we share our work and we see other people's that we go, oh, that's a really interesting idea or technique. How can I apply that to my own work? How can I use that and take it one step further? So if you are on Instagram or Facebook, you can read our project description to get all of the yummy, great information to share your work.
Yes.
Or if you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. Thank you guys so much for painting this autumn road scene with me. I hope it brought you a little bit of nostalgia for the season, you know? Keenan, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.